Welcome to the Big 5-0, lesson number 1. As mentioned, we're going to try to keep all of these 5 minutes or less. The main focus is very simple. Jesus lived an amazing life, and he lived it for a certain reason, so we could look at him, examine it, and then see how we line up. Lesson number 1 is very simple. It's called that Jesus led by example. What do I mean by that? In Mark chapter 1, John the Baptist enters the scene. The nation of Israel had not been following after God for more than 400 years. John the Baptist comes along and starts preaching this simple message: repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. His followers who agreed with that message began to get baptized, to say, I agree with this message. It's time for us to turn back to God and repent. Jesus enters the scene, and in Mark chapter 1, it tells us that Jesus comes up to John the Baptist and asks him to be baptized. Why? He wanted to agree with this message. So it says in verse 9, at that time Jesus came from Nazareth in Galilee and was baptized by John in the Jordan. As Jesus was coming up out of the water, he saw heaven being torn open, the Spirit descending like a dove, and a voice from heaven said, "You are my Son, whom I love. With you I am well pleased." Jesus was setting a standard that he would lead an example for others to follow. That continued throughout his entire ministry. Later on in the book, in Mark chapter 12, some of the religious leaders of the day asked Jesus, what's the most important commandment? He replied to them, love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind. And then he said, love your neighbor as yourself. He made that bold statement, and then for the rest of his ministry, he did exactly that. He loved everyone that he met, encouraged them, reached out to them, had dinner with them. In fact, he spent so much time with them that some of the religious leaders of the day were angry. They said, what's with this guy? He's hanging out with all of these sinners. Why was he doing it? He was leading by example. What does that mean for us? If you're a follower of his, if you're a Christian, a born-again believer in Jesus Christ, whether you like it or not, the world is watching you. Are the things that you do they match up with the things that you say? If we were to open up the Bible and say, how are you doing today? Are you setting a good example? This first lesson is important. It's vital because Jesus led by example, and he wants us to do the same thing. So I leave you with this thought. If the world watches you like the world watched Jesus, what would they see? I can't come to your house and I can't examine you and do a little test to see how you're doing, but you can open up the book and see how you're doing. Jesus led by example. He expects us to do the same thing.